Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Fort Bragg's backyard, this is the show that put the 110 Nation on the map. There is only one nation, the 110 Nation, and you're listening to the 110 Nation Sports Show, covering each and every sport across the board. There is no sport too large or too little. It's time to talk the talk. Here we go. Here's the man, the founder, and your host, Mr. CJ Sports.
I want to welcome everybody to the 110 Nation Sports Show. I'm your host, Mr. CJ Sports. You got to bear with me. I saw this thing on Facebook. New roller barricades design. It's like a bunch of like roller blades, roller wheels on a, I don't know, like would be a wall, but I'm visualizing like Super Mario Karts where you get on those little like triangles or whatever. It makes you go faster. Like they're asking, would this save additional damage to race cars? And I'm just sitting there thinking, if somebody blows a tire and goes to the wall, how much longer is it going to take them to slow down? You know, no longer got this concrete wall that's slowing you down. You got a bunch of wheels. And all it's going to do is just keep going. Like, I'm just, where do people come up with this stuff? And I don't see how that could be safe. Like, there's no, like, safer barrier, like, give. Like, you hit that and, granted, you're just going to roll. I don't know. I just saw it on Facebook, and I'm just sitting here thinking, you know, I didn't even think, I was going to wait until Mike came on and just talk about it. And then as the show intro was going, this is what I'm visualizing before the show starts, is somebody hitting the wall, and just like Super Mario Kart, you get that little triangle or whatever, and the little arrows that kind of like, I don't know, glow in a golden color. I don't know how to describe it. It shoots you to go faster. But just, you get that wall. You use that wall to help you on the fourth turn path. Like, you get pinned on the outside, or have to go on past the outside. You hit those wheels, and it shoots you faster. Oh, goodness. Things I see, the thoughts that go through my head. Anyways, Monday night. Glad to be back on the show. Glad to be back on the air. I know Mike, meant to do this, but I got sidetracked. I've been really bad lately. I think one of the greater joys of life that I missed out on growing up was the fact that I was too young to really understand Cheers and really appreciate the TV series Cheers. And so for the last, I don't know, month maybe, at most, I've gone through 6 seasons of Cheers. Like, that has been my binge show that ain't been on for like 30 years or so. I'm a little bit over season 6. I think I'm about done with season 6. I can't remember out of 11 seasons. So that's been my, I guess my somewhat of a distraction. It was such a great show. So entertaining. Oh, goodness. See, getting sidetracked. Oh, but I didn't. That's my point, because I got sidetracked talking about the show. That sidetracked me from getting the records. So when Mike is doing the intro, I'm going to, or when I get Mike on here, and he plugs Friday's show and what we got going on this week, and get into our topics. I'm going to tally up our records and it's like a thorn in my side. Like when I looked down and looked at the second game that was on the sheet, it's like I was just stabbed with this thorn that was like twisted in my side. You know, not only do I have to have one tie on my record, now I got to have two ties. Why, NFL? Why are we still having ties? How do we have 75 minutes of play time, about 4 hours of our life? How do we invest that much time to walk away with a handshake and say, you know what, nobody wins, let's go home? How? Why? How does this happen? But while Mike's on, like I said, I'm gonna tally up our records and see where we're sitting at. Mike seems to, from the energy I've gotten from his messages, has had a pretty decent day. I don't think my day went so good. Cleveland, why couldn't you just give me the win? Why couldn't you just 20-7? How do you screw that up? Detroit, you upset me as well. Oakland, you scared me there for a minute. Jalen Kiski, or however the hell you pronounce this. That man ain't missed one field goal in like 2 years, and all of a sudden he misses two. One to finish up the game and one in overtime, or to finish regulation, and then one in overtime. How? He ain't missed one in 2 years. He missed one all last year. He may not miss none this year. How's that work? I tell you what, it's got to be tough to be an Oakland fan. I'm getting ready to get you on, Mike. These thoughts just keep coming to me. Like, I don't know if I could sit on the edge. I guess it's kind of been like being a Cleveland fan in the World Series right now. Those games have been crazy close for the most part, especially the last three? Anyway, let me get through my spiel real quick. I'm going to get Mike on here. You guys can check us out on Twitter at 110Nation. You can follow me at CJ Sports 1. You can check us out on Facebook, 110 Nation Sports. You can check out my personal fan page, Mr. CJ Sports. Check out our site, www.110nationsports.com, for all the latest going on here at the 110 Nation. Also, Fit for Life. Make sure you guys check them out on Facebook. You can also go to our site, www.110nationsports.com. On the right-hand side, there's a banner, and it says Fit for Life. All you do is click on it, find out for the location near you, 24/7, 365. Get your gym on. Great staff, courteous staff, clean facility, all the stuff you need, all the equipment you need. Make sure you check them out. That's Fit for Life. Snafu Seasoning, the official sponsor of Thursday night's Racing with Big Sweat, 9 p.m. 100% all-natural meat rub, cook rub, cook season 100%, all-natural, no preservative. Make sure you guys check them out. That's Snafu Seasoning. And also got to thank the I-95 Sports Network and Mile High Radio for rebroadcasting our shows or syndicating them over there on their network. Without them, we wouldn't be able to grow like we've been able to grow. So I got to thank every last one of them. Anyway, the man of the hour. Let's go ahead and let's get Mike in the studio. Let's find out what we got going on Friday night, how he can be followed, liked, and let's talk some sports. Kind of sprinkled, kind of there you go, kind of seeded the field a little bit. We're going to see which one of those topics are going to sprout up, and what other topics. I don't know where I'm getting this stuff from. I'm just kind of left this like sleep schedule's got me all jacked up. Just getting up at 2:45, but 3:40 in the morning and go all day and not get back to bed until 11, 12 o'clock at night. It's for the birds. You definitely got to get some things situated. But anyway, I can keep coming up. I can probably do this all 2 hours. Really just go left field, right field, try to get back in the center, and then shift it left and right, just like I did again. Well, let's get Mike in the studio. He's probably ready for me to hit the mute button. Mike, how you doing tonight?
There you go, CJ. How you doing? I know it was a tough weekend for you. but I tried to play both sides. What I did was I posted, obviously, the World Series result, but also Peter King, as you probably read if you read your timeline, on Monday Morning Quarterback. He has the column Monday Morning Quarterback with SI, Sports Illustrated, and he seems to think that even though the Browns are 0-8, that things aren't as bad as they seem. So, believe it or not, he put some positive things in there about the Browns. I figured you might want to read that. At least cheer you up partially anyway. But as far as Friday night, another interesting show. We're going to have Rowan Pinnock, who is a Whelen modified driver, and the other reason we're having him on, I got him through another contact. He is also starting a business with his crew chief and the crew chief's significant other, I guess you could say, a wheel company. Now, generally speaking, when you talk about auto parts, you know, people sell auto parts in general and different auto parts. They are selling wheels, okay? And so we'll hear about his business venture with his crew chief and the crew chief's significant other. 3 people that I know of that's in that business and starting that business. And with the off season now and people getting their cars situated after the holidays, this is going to be probably their time to sell auto parts and not so much auto parts for them, but the wheels of the specific cars. And they are based, I believe, in New England, because Rowan basically runs the Whelen Modified Tour, which is out of Connecticut, Massachusetts, etc. And so he will be on the program discussing that. And as I discussed last week, we will have Kyle Soper, who I don't believe fared too well, but as CJ always says on his program, and anybody says, that to get there for the first time is a major step. So he appeared or went to Martinsville this weekend to campaign or attempt to campaign a truck. And as I understand it, he missed the first practice, or they didn't bring the truck out for the first practice. He was there in time, but something happened with the truck, and they didn't get the first practice session in. They ran the second practice session and placed, I believe, in the 30s. And I don't know exactly where he ended up as far as the race itself, but we'll talk to him. I'll get hold of him and make sure that he's coming on. He was coming on as of last week, so I might assume nothing has changed, and I text him today. And also a third guest leading into a guest we had last week, Ann Young, talking about Bob Finan. I'm trying to get Bob Finan to come on Friday night. So we should have 3 very interesting guests, and Bob have on, because not only is he the announcer and the PR man for Riverhead, but he's also celebrating, as Ann pointed out. They had their little party for Bob on Saturday night. Apparently a very good turnout as well, at TJ Halpin's, which is a local restaurant and bar setup and everything else. And they apparently had a very good turnout on Saturday night as well. So we will salute Bob on the program, assuming he can come on. He's the one that I haven't heard from as yet, on Friday night. So 3 good guests coming up Friday again, CJ.
You know, while you're doing your publicity, I'm tallying up the records. And I want to first of all say go team Mr. CJ Sports, as I did pick this week. All three of my games that I lost, though, the losing team had the lead at some point in the fourth quarter. The Cleveland Browns, with that 20-7 lead that they had at one point in the game, the Detroit Lions had went up, and the daggone Seattle Seahawks were up until late in that game. All three of those games, that really just kind of irks me off, knowing that the three games that I did lose, at some point in the fourth, I thought I was going to end up winning that game, and I knew most of the games that I did lose. I thought I lost more than that. I knew most of the games that I did, or the games that I can remember that I lost, I knew they were all games that I had the lead at some point, and my team that I picked should have won, but I didn't realize that those were the only games I actually lost. I went 8-3-1 out of 12 games. We got tonight's game, of course, still to go. What was that, Minnesota and Chicago? Is that who it is tonight?
That's the game. I thought I was going to get... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I thought I was going to get burned last night's game for a while because Philadelphia was running all over Dallas early. And then... thankfully, they came back, so that's another win for me, and another feather in Dak Prescott's cap. So, just seems to me, CJ, I don't know how you feel about specifically. We just got touched on this when Prescott started leading them very well, but that to me, last night's result is another. Nail in Tony Romo's coffin, not so much off the team, but as far as how do you sit this guy down. Now, the majority of the game last night, Dallas was trailing and looked to be in a hole, and here comes Dak Prescott at the end and leading them to victory. So, admittedly, it was overtime and everything else, but he brought them back and allowed them to play overtime, and thankfully they pulled one out last night. But very strange week.
You know, as many times as you kind of wish you were Jerry Jones, wish you had ownership of America's football team, have a ridiculously huge stadium with more so a ridiculously huge big screen TV that's like the size of the football field. Besides being the billionaire and besides just having that life, I guess this is one part of Jerry Jones's life that I'm glad that I don't have to deal with. You know, Tony Romo's been the golden child, like Jerry Jones' book, he could do no wrong. No matter what has happened. And, I mean, part of it is valid. I mean, statistically, he is the best Dallas Cowboy quarterback ever. I know Dallas Cowboy fans don't want to hear that. I know that those anti-Tony Romo people out there cringe when they hear that, but statistically, he's the best quarterback the Dallas Cowboys has ever had. But now you know you're closing in on a decision to make. Either you go ahead and you continue and play this season out, because if you take Dak Prescott over Tony Romo, you have to go all in. No matter what happens at that point on, you got to go all in. You can't say, okay, he's had a bad game, we're going back to Tony Romo. Or he's had a couple bad games, okay, we're going back to Tony Romo. Because you're going to hurt the confidence of Tony Romo. And now if you do that, now you're going to shoot confidence in your future.
Right.
But you got committed to Tony Romo. You've done financially invested into him being your starting quarterback. So are you willing to sit there and pay Tony Romo the kind of money that you're paying Tony Romo to play backup quarterback to a rookie quarterback? I would hate to have to take that all way out the odds and ends. Me, at this point, I am looking towards my future. Tony Romo's been my immediate past, and he was my present up until he got hurt in preseason. The injuries are a yearly thing. Him missing games are a yearly thing. Yes, for the Dallas Cowboys, if he is healthy, doesn't get hurt, he's the best thing probably for the Dallas Cowboys right now today. Because if they continue on, then yes, there's a better chance that he is going to win them the Super Bowl with his veterancy and everything else than a rookie that is going to be nervous as I don't know what, trying to prove that he belongs there, and is probably going to overcompensate and probably not have a very good outing. I don't take anything away from Dak Prescott, but he has not played to the level that would make me think, okay, we get deep in the playoffs, we get to the Super Bowl, he is ready to handle this. Yes, we go to a wild card game, kind of like Tim Tebow in the Denver Broncos. What do you got to lose? Okay, yes, I can see him pull one out. But you start getting deeper and deeper in the playoffs, and you got to play a Seattle team that has had all season to fine-tune, and we know how Seattle can get when we get to the end of the season, we can get into the playoffs. Hence the fact that they've been to the Super Bowl so many dang on times. What's going to happen when you meet up against the number one defense, such as the Denver Broncos in the Super Bowl? What happens when you go against Tom Brady in playoff mode in the Super Bowl? Those things I don't think Dak Prescott is ready for. But if I'm Jerry Jones, with that being said, if I'm Jerry Jones, I'm all in for my future. Because we know that Tony Romo is one hit away from being done again. Possibly permanently done. We know that Tony Romo is in the latter part of his career, and you only got a couple more years with him. Why continue the same trend that has happened throughout his whole NFL career when you are looking at your future smack in your face and how well this offense has already clicked and how well these two rookies that you're going to have for a while are meshing. There's too many things that are going positive. Yes, you might have a better chance this year winning the Super Bowl with Tony Romo, which I don't think is going to happen anyway. But I am looking towards the future. I don't think there's enough of a chance that Tony Romo could lead you to the Super Bowl and win it for me to throw in and risk breaking the confidence of my future and messing up the rhythm and the consistency and everything else that is going on with this combination.
Yeah, well, I agree with you on a couple of counts, CJ, but you have to say one thing. Now, in terms of where I agree with you, yes, he hasn't played under playoff pressure. Dak Prescott. Yes, he is a rookie. You know, by nature, the first year you're a rookie. There's two things with that, though. One, he hasn't played like a rookie, not by any stretch of the imagination. Has he made mistakes? Yes. Has he made mistakes that kill the team? Not that I could say that he hasn't thrown, 17 interceptions to the opposition. Sorry about that rhyme, Fitzpatrick, whatever. He doesn't play like, that kind of thing. So he hasn't played like a rookie. Now, I agree with you that when you get down to the playoffs with the opposition, whoever it is stepping up their game, that's probably a whole different animal from everything. If you follow sports, you know that's a whole different animal regardless. But I just don't see, maybe Jerry Jones sees something else, but I just don't see how you can sit this kid down in the regular season if Tony Romo's ready to come back and say, okay, you're back on the bench. I just don't see it right now. If he goes into a slump where he loses 3 or 4 or 5 games in a row, then yeah. But I just don't see with the level he's playing to right now in the regular season that you can sit Dak Prescott right now. Rightly or wrongly, and I was the first one when we started talking about this to say to you, CJ, that I have never heard of a veteran losing his job solely for an injury. But then you point out, too, that this is not Tony Romo's first injury where you could say, oh, he's getting old or something. This has happened to him now maybe at least 2 years. I want to say maybe even 3, if I'm not mistaken, 3 years in a row that he's been hurt. And the 2 straight is with the broken back, the same thing happening, shoulder and back. And I think there was a 3rd year in there somewhere of late as well. So it's not the same Tony Romo age-wise and agility-wise. And so that plays into it, too, with Prescott's maneuverability or scrambling ability to get out of the way, and also to basically to lead. Now he's not, he hasn't had a problem in that area. And just last night, how he brought them back, and I'm sure there was other in the 5-1 record or whatever they were prior. I'm sure there were other games that I didn't necessarily see because they weren't on TV here anyway. As far as bringing them back and leading them to that record, I'm sure there was obviously very good play involved in the whole season. And that's why I don't see, Jones sitting him down or the Cowboys sitting him down. Now, I agree with, and the second thing I agree with you, or the third thing in that whole thing is I'm glad we don't have to make that decision because it's not an easy decision.
You're kind of deciding kind of the present and the future all in the same swoop. Like, I don't think this team is ready to. I think you're too young. You got too many young players for this team to go all the way, and I just don't think this is a complete team to win it all. And
no, I don't think they're going to go to the Super Bowl. Even with Dak Prescott, because
so you're kind of in a. Like I said, you're kind of in a bad spot because your best chance of actually going and winning is Tony Romo. Not that I'm saying I feel there's really a chance, but your best shot at the future and being in future Super Bowls and the future for the team is Dak Prescott. And you got a decision to make. You go all in on the odds of you going to the Super Bowl or winning the Super Bowl, or you go all in on your future and just suck up that salary and either find a way to get rid of the golden child or a way to restructure that contract or just suck it up, one of the three. But I definitely don't envy that decision to make.
Yep.
I went 8-3-1. Mike went. He followed in right behind me at 7-4-1. We'll talk a little bit about the games we lost. A couple of them were interesting. A couple of them, I got to say I was the only one that picked the team, and Mike got to say the same thing on a couple of games as well. The New Orleans game sticks out. I kind of got had the bragging rights on the Atlanta and Carolina game this week. Shorty and Shannon both followed in behind Mike with a 6-5-1. Gives me the most breathing room that I've had all season long, with a 2-game lead over Shorty. I'm 61-42-2, just short of 60%. Of course, my year goal is to be 75%. Shorty's following in right behind me. It's a 59-44-2 record, 57.3%. Mike's followed in their third, 55-38-2 record with a 53.4. And, of course, Shannon's only been participating like the last 3 weeks, I think, with a 31-24-2 record, 56.4% winning percentage. So that's where we stand. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about some of these games and how did we manage to have two ties? How did we manage to go back-to-back in 4 games? We had 2 ties in the 4 consecutive games. You go from Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, Sunday morning. Game 1 and Game 4 in the 4 games that kind of in consecutive there were ties. And we almost had 2 ties in the same day as it came down to the last minute or so. God, what game was that it came down? It was at the Oakland game. Came down to the last minute or under a minute or so before they finally put that game away.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Ties. Is it time, Mike? Are we finally at the point, or am I the only one that is just tired of ties and don't like ties?
No, well, I'll tell you, in football, CJ, the only ties I ever heard of late, I mean, was during a training camp game or a preseason game where they say, okay, it doesn't mean anything, you can go home. And it's 15-15 or it's 12-12, that kind of game. But, in preseason where you're just basically, maybe the first week of preseason or something, and it's getting late and it means nothing, because your roster is full as far as, you're going to have to cut like 50-some-odd guys and anyway and all that. And it's that's the only time I've heard of a tie in football until this year. And then the first thing I thought of when you private messaged me after the second tie, and I'm thinking, this is something that CJ and I are going to have to discuss with Izzo, because who would have thought that, used to be only hockey had ties, and now hockey, set their guidelines up where they're not even happy with ties. They do everything they can with overtime and, what is it they call it, shootout and everything else to avoid it. And here we go with football starting with it, and it's very strange. I guess Izzo's got to be like chuckling to himself seeing 2 ties in football when he already said he'd rather watch a hockey game. So I think tomorrow night he's going to have us, ask us to get more involved with hockey, CJ. That's all I can say. It's ironic. It really is, because hockey was the only sport where you'd say, okay, it's a 1-1 tie, it's a 3-3 tie, whatever, and each team gets 1 point, and that was done in the National Hockey League, but not in the NFL till this year. And I'm very surprised, very surprised that they haven't addressed it,
I also have to thank the Washington Redskins and the Cincinnati Bengals, because in my rant last week about why do we have 2 teams nobody cared about, Tennessee and Jacksonville on Thursday, one of the games that I listed that should be a good game, it might not have playoff implications. You got a 4-3 Washington and a 3-4 Cincinnati Bengal team. But I said it should be a good game. And so, yes, it sucked it into a tie, but it was a good competitive game. It was close. It wasn't like we watched Jacksonville or Tennessee go out to 28-0 or something by halftime on Thursday night on teams. Not only was it bad enough that nobody really cared about these 2 teams, then you had one of the teams come out and blow the other team out of the water. Like I said, this Washington and Cincinnati game, I knew it was going to be a great game. That's the game that you wanted to be your standalone game. Then you send Jacksonville and Tennessee over there, and it's nothing to the fact that you just sent 2 crappy teams over there. But that's how your Sunday kicks off. Not too many Americans are getting up at 9:30 in the morning to watch a football game here on the East Coast, and they'll be even farther behind on the West Coast. So you're not losing nothing. Then you get to use the rest of the day to bounce back, which you got that opportunity, especially when you had the New Orleans-Seattle game come down to the wire. You had the Oakland and Tampa Bay game going in overtime. You had the Detroit, whoever Detroit lost to, I can't think of the top of my head now because nobody picked them. That game came down.
Was that the Green Bay game?
No, Green Bay lost to Atlanta.
Atlanta, right.
You had Cleveland and the Jets game actually be a competitively close game as the Jets came back. The Atlanta-Green Bay game, another great game. I don't think Indy was too far behind. But you had all day to recuperate off that first game. And I feel that the NFL screwed that up and should have had the 9:30 Sunday, the Washington-Cincinnati game. That should have been your Thursday night game. That should have kicked off your standalone game. That should have kicked off your week. A game that you know is going to be two good teams that are going to be competitively close versus two teams that nobody cares about. And Jacksonville's been horrible for years. It wasn't like you were expecting a sudden change.
No.
So, but I got to thank them for making it a very competitive and close game. What games did you get to pay close attention to and absorb? I got to watch the red zones. I got to bounce around and watch all the early games, the evening games. I ended up falling asleep. I was asleep by 7 o'clock yesterday. Then when I had to get 2:45 this morning, so I was done. I think you might have sent some messages. Shorty sent some messages, but I was gone. And Miss Lee sent some messages. Matter of fact, here as of late, she's still up when I'm getting up, and she's not gone to bed when I've been getting up in the morning. So we've actually been able to communicate in the morning because I'm getting up and she's starting to wrap things up for the night.
Right.
But what games did you get to catch, and what things around the NFL caught your eye?
Well, early. Well, I don't know how early, but what I did was I monitored the scores, and some of the games I didn't see because they weren't on TV here where I am. But I was beginning to think that maybe my Jets would give you your first win at first, but they came back, which shows you how bad the Browns are. But that was my first surprise when I flipped on the score through ESPN's website and saw the the Browns were beating the Jets. I said, oh no. So that would be something to talk about, and I was happy for you at the same time and sad for me. But they came back. The other score, I guess, that surprised me was Kansas City going in the tank. Again, they're a strong team, and I don't know if it's the coach or what it is, but Andy Reid, so up and down. They have games where they look like they're world beaters, and the quarterback, looks like he could beat the whole world, and then the next week they come back and play like, Top Warner team. So, they're so unpredictable, and they're getting to be more unpredictable. And games at home, they're always good, but they just go so up and down all year. Green Bay, you got to say that was close, and like you said, Atlanta's a good team. But I just couldn't bet against Aaron Rodgers. They're not going to go 16-0. But I was a little surprised at that. But again, that was a close game, and basically they were all close. That we came out on losses. CJ, there were no real blowouts as far as that. Any blowouts that occurred was because of we all picked that particular team, so it wasn't like a loss for us. I'm talking about the losses that we picked were basically close games that, as you said, came down to a field goal or overtime or whatever. Again, another team based on my experience with the AFC East that can't find itself is the Miami Dolphins. just on a seasonal basis, and then you turn around and look at New England, and there you go with New England, and they're going to win regardless. And Gronkowski, Rob Gronkowski broke another record. I think I saw. If I didn't put it up, I should have. I'll go back and look. That he has broke a record for a receiving record over the weekend again. And that team just keeps, I would like to know what they eat on their trading table, because something is different with that team. Belichick, to give him credit, and he was a Jets staffer for a while under Parcells. He somehow manages to talk to every guy, or get through to every, talk, maybe yells, whatever, but gets through to that 53rd guy where they all pitch in. They all feel like a part of the team, and it's definitely mental with them. Mental in a good way. That they seem to think that no matter how deep they may get into a hole during a game, that they're going to get out of it and they're going to win, and they do. And so you can't say that's a surprise. That's, here we go again with them. Now, they might get to game 16 and need a win and not advance into playoffs, or not so much not advance, but maybe they'll get to the first round and then get bushwhacked by somebody in the first or second round. That's happened. But as far as the regular season, they're going to go 15-1, 14-2 pretty regularly, at least based on their history, and regardless of their personnel. Also, and this is not Brady, this is anybody. I'm not talking about the quarterback specifically. So, yeah, as far as the surprise teams, though, I guess, again, the teams I picked that where I went against the grain, I just had a feeling that, New Orleans was a perfect example. Everyone was saying New Orleans is not as good as they have been in the past. Granted, they gave up. They traded away Jimmy, or whatever his name is, Jimmy Graham, to Seattle, and a lot of their players on their team. One of which I don't even know if he's still there, but I used to follow him because he was from Hofstra. The receiver Colston, I think he's gone now, but he was the last of because Hofstra disbanded their football team. That was Division III, and so they disbanded a couple of seasons ago. But Colston was the last Hofstra University graduate to be in the NFL, and I don't think he's there anymore. But I followed them because of him for a while, along with my Jets, and yes, they weren't as strong. They haven't been as strong as they have been in the past. But something just told me to pick them last week, and I did, and they won. So that's the kind of thing where I guess Indy is a little bit of a surprise. They're just not righting their ship. You would think that by now they would have a better record. So there are teams that statistically or traditionally have done well that have not done so well this year, and I don't follow them as closely or to look or to see how bad Luck is this year. Andrew Luck. Obviously he's not having any luck, no pun intended. As much as any luck as he's had in the past few seasons, and it's showing. There are teams that are not playing well that just make you scratch your head, and then you wonder too. And I'm just saying this as your as a fellow host on the 110 Nation and your friend CJ. I don't know what it's going to take to right the Browns. They're just amazing. Even when they get out ahead of it, and I'll firmly admit that the Jets are a bad team this year. Even when they get out ahead of a bad team, it's like they forgot they're supposed to lose, and they let the other team back in it, and it's very, very strange. Both in the positive sense if you look at New England, and the negative sense if you look at Cleveland. And I really don't know what's going to turn them around. That's why I say read the article I posted by Peter King, and he points out a few things, but I guess not enough to make them not be 8-8. But they're just a very strange team, and like the Jets, you wonder if they're going to have to go for another quarterback and draft another quarterback again. And you go through, and then there's going to be, he's a college quarterback. He needs a couple of years to learn, maybe 2. If they don't come up with a Dak Prescott that, has a charmed year in his first year out, which is not in Cleveland's history. But a lot of that goes, to the front office too, CJ, as far as drafting and whatever. It's a cumulative thing, just like positive, just like things on, positive things build up and give you that culture, and so does negative things, and it happens so often, and it's just very, very strange to see.
It's like the Browns go out of their way to ruin it. Like, there's been too many games this year that they have been up and they've managed to let the lead just slip away. And, in the back of your mind, it makes you wonder, are they intentionally trying to lose these games? Are they intentionally trying to get first place? Get the number 1 draft anyway? I don't know. It just... At once upon a time, it was tough, and I think I speak for almost all diehard Cleveland fans. The Browns are your number 1 Cleveland team. It's great that the Cavaliers have won, the championship. It's great that the Indians in the World Series, and they're 1 game away from winning a championship. But until the Browns do it, you still have this hole. Like, it's Browns first, then all the rest of the Cleveland teams behind that. It's a little bit easier these days because of the fact that the Cavaliers have won a championship and have already started off 3-0 this year and look really, really good. It's easier these days because you have the Indians in the World Series and they're 1 game away and it looks great. And I know the Cavaliers look really great on possibly going back-to-back, and just gives you hopes that the Indians have something to build off of. So it makes it easier, and it makes it so Cleveland fans can still carry a smile on their face because, yes, we have other sports that are doing good, and we have things to look up to or look forward to, but there's still a part of us that are our Cleveland fans that we desperately want to see the Cleveland Browns turn their franchise around and be able to be contenders in the playoffs and contenders to go to the Super Bowl. And it's very frustrating because over the last handful, 5 to 7 years, we've had a couple of teams that were assembled that were pretty decent, and if they would have built on it and went and got the pieces that they needed, we could have been legitimate contenders. I don't know about winning the Super Bowl, but legitimate contenders. And it's like they went out of their way and pulled all those pieces. One of the years when we had Brian Hoyer, playing. We were a 500 team. There for a little bit. We were the number one team in the NFC North, AFC North. We've had a glimpse of what we can become, and the fact that we can assemble a team and become legitimate contenders. But it's like the front office goes out of its way to trip over its own 2 feet. And then that kind of trickles down, and when you're rotating coach after coach after coach, by the time these guys finally learn, a system, you're pulling that whole coaching staff out, and you're putting a whole new coaching staff in. I understand that the way to fix, you're not getting fired and hold on to your job is wins, but if you don't give these coaches any amount of time to actually get a system implicated. And for the team, you got 53 individuals that are going to be on that team this year. Doesn't mean those 53 on the next year. So where it takes that first wave of 53 to learn your system, now you might have 40 of those players that are going to build from that or build on that system. But now you got 13 new players that are on that organization that now have to learn that system. And now you got 2 waves of people on different wavelengths. It takes a good 3 or 4 years of having the same system in there, so now you start having players that have been in the system 4 years. You got players that have been in the system for 3 years and 2 years versus every 2 years or so you're rotating coaches and you're not getting a full team full of players that have experienced this system. And then it trickles down to the players that you can't complete games. If the Cleveland Browns would even win half the games that they've actually led this year, they would almost be a 500 team. They've been close in a lot of games, but just can't seem to put a full 60 minutes together, and it's very frustrating as a Browns fan, and even more specifically, I said that backwards, a Cleveland fan, because, like I said, when it comes to Cleveland fans, the Browns are your number one. That's your heart. All the rest of that is just the rest of the organs, and even more specifically, being a Browns fan, it's tough.
I could say, CJ, growing up in New York, and not knowing, not following Cleveland sports except when either the Indians played the Yankees or, and the Cavaliers not having team until, what was it, the 70s, those Mark Price teams, Brad Daugherty and whatever, whenever they came into the league, I can remember going back, and again, not to get age, but I am older, the Browns were the big thing. I mean, when you talk about the dog pound and all the things, the fans, the fans being, rabid, no pun intended, in the dog pound and the whole 9 yards and the Kosar years. And I think back at, you had some decent coaches, too. When you think of Marty Schottenheimer, okay, and I won't even go to Bill Belichick because that was his first job, okay? But, all right, so Bill Belichick learned something since, okay, fine. We'll go there because, everybody doesn't have success the first year
Bill
out.
Belichick and Nick Saban on that same coaching staff in Cleveland. Just imagine the fact that you had Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, probably one of the, I'm not going to say the best, but one of the best college coaches of all time, and one of the greatest head coaches of all time, were both part of that Cleveland Browns staff before they decided they were. Not to mention, there was a handful of other great coaches that went on to have great careers other places. But those two together, right there, just headline that coaching staff. But yeah, I agree. There's been many great coaches in that franchise over the years.
And it's very weird because the last really successful, and you would know more than I, they didn't make the Super Bowl. They went through, I want to say the fumble, the interception with the Kosar and the Broncos at the time and whatever. But that COSAR team was the last team that I can remember that era of being a really competitive football team, and then Art Modell moved the team to Baltimore after that. But there again, you had two very good coaches who went elsewhere and led other teams to the playoffs, and yet they couldn't get over the hump with the Browns. So, I mean, it's just very, very strange. You had, and I made this point about the Chargers. The last good Charger teams I remember were with Junior Seau on them, and those teams, the early Junior Seau teams, I believe were coached by Marty Schottenheimer. I know he was there for a long time. I don't know if that was the same club, but I think he led them to the playoffs a couple of times with San Diego, and then he was also with Kansas City before Andy Reid and before other people, but definitely before, Andy Reid was there. So, and Cleveland had all these coaches, or at least two of them, and didn't really, go anywhere with them, and that's where a lot of it becomes mental. I'll admit that, Belichick probably learned more under Parcells later, definitely, but it's just very strange. Very, very strange how some teams fall into that pattern and just can't break it. And you wonder, like you said, how many times are the Browns, to take an example, going to have the number one draft pick, but then there's another point to this. It's not a matter of picking number one. You have to pick the right person. And there are times. What was it? The year that Michael Jordan was picked number 2. To just switch sports for a second, where Sam Bowie was a number 1 pick, but the Chicago Bulls didn't faze the Chicago Bulls. Michael Jordan became Michael Jordan, and still, so it's not just the pick themselves. You got to pick the right person. And that's where teams like, the Cleveland Browns fall on their face every year, it seems. So very, very strange. And that's why I say it's got to start in the front office and work its way down. And that's where, at this point, I know I'm skipping around, but there's an element to why I'm saying this. The Jerry Jones situation with Dallas, this is where Jerry Jones would be smart. I'm not saying he's going to do this, but he'd be smart to just back away from, being so intrusive, like being in the draft room and everything else, and letting his football people take care of the football team. I'm not saying don't be an owner, don't be a cheerleader, don't be up in your box. Don't be flying to other, to away games. By all means, you spend the money, you want to be involved. But don't be involved so much that you get to be intrusive to the point where you don't know what you're doing and you ruin things. And that's where you and I touched base on this, CJ, and said, hopefully he's not going to mess things up. Because that's the first thing you think of with someone like Jerry Jones.
Not to switch subjects, but I'm going to switch subjects for a second. We ain't got to go into this. We can go to something else. But I saw something a little bit ago before the show. How about Players of the Week? I'm assuming LeBron must have won it week 1. I don't know. But they were showing a stat, Player of the Week since the 89-90 season or something, that LeBron's won it 54 times, and Kobe was second with like 33 times, and Jordan was third with like 20-something times. As big as I'm a LeBron fan and a Cleveland Cavalier fan, it wasn't, my first thought wasn't, wow, he's better than everybody else. look one more stat for him to dominate. And not like that. My first thought, and I want to know what your first thought was, it's probably not going to be the same, and then I want you to give me your thoughts on my thought. My first thought right out the gate was, is that saying more about the competition level in the 80s and 90s versus what the competition level is now? And what I'm saying is, if he's won it 54 times versus Kobe 33 versus Michael Jordan 26 or so, whatever it was, does that mean we have less talented players, or is LeBron really that good?
I think it's a combination of both because he's very good, and you got to think there's very few players that have come out directly from high school like LeBron did. Okay, the last one that I can think of, again, it might have been before your time, was Moses Malone, who was the first one to come out of a high school in Virginia someplace, if my memory serves me correctly, and play in the NBA. But I think it's a combination of both because there was another thing that came across in basketball while we're on that subject, and I'll give you my thought on what you were saying. I just think it's a combination of both things. I think LeBron is very good. I think he's probably if since Michael Jordan retired, I think the person that has taken over that, where everybody knows him by his first name or just by his presence, that would be LeBron, and backs it up with his game. That's the difference. You can be a media personality, but you have to also be a media personality, but he backs it up with his game as well. Okay, and so if he becomes too, what's the word I'm looking for? Not annoying, but if people get a little bit crazy about, LeBron's in the a story on LeBron again. He's one of the ones, like Jordan, that backed it up with his game. People thought the same way about Jordan for a while. Oh, here we go, Michael Jordan again. Everybody was writing, the basketball writers were writing about Michael Jordan. Well, yes, he was media all over the place in the media, but the reason was not just that he was famous, but that he was backing it up with his game every night. There was a guy that was scoring 50 and something, that kind of thing. And what to draw a parallel and talk about what I was thinking of today, I just posted a story on the Golden State Warriors, and I thought of you, CJ, because in the preseason rankings, we were talking about the rankings where, the Cleveland Cavaliers didn't get tremendous amount of respect, and they were picked for they weren't even picked number one in the rankings, and it was Kevin Durant and the Golden State Warriors, and Cleveland had just won the title, and I remember you and I discussing that on the show here, and what I posted the article today that states that Golden State is still looking for their identity with Durant, and so I had to chuckle because I was thinking, here's another story that CJ is going to be pleased about, being a Cavaliers fan, because even now with Durant, they're trying to figure out how they're going to, I guess the gist of the article was, how do we distribute the ball like we did when, Harrison Barnes and all these other people were there, and it was just Stephen Curry, giving the ball to everybody. And the gist of the article was they really haven't found their identity with Durant in the lineup. So, you can have a top guy, but again, you need that second or third guy to make things work. Jordan had Pippen and the other guard, I forget his name now, or the other forward, but there were like three guys that basically made up that nucleus of those Bulls teams that won like 6 championships. But you don't always do it with one guy, and that's the thing that I know as a Cleveland fan stood out to you. His rookie year, I want to say it was his rookie year, that you bring it up all the time, CJ, when you talk about LeBron, that he led them to the playoffs pretty much out of the box, and then left. But you were always talking about the nature of that team, that he helped into the playoffs with basically him and nobody else. And basically you need 2 or 3 guys along with that marquee name to get you to the next level, and that's what's so impressive about LeBron.
Oh goodness, I didn't catch this, and reason I'm laughing. Video. I don't even want to pull up the video because I really don't want to see it in detail. But someone at the New England Patriots and Buffalo Bills game threw a dildo onto the football field. So,
oh, God. Oh, man.
Yep, they got a picture of the video, and it's at the 1-yard line. So I don't know if that's where it landed, where it bounced, hit the first time or what. But yes, a fan threw a dildo out onto the field. I just saw that. That was rather funny.
I wonder if he got ejected from the stadium or whatever. They caught him, but probably a Rex Ryan fan, But anyway.
Yeah, it was a real dick. It was a real dick move.
Yes. Pun intended there, CJ. Yes.
Oh goodness. I don't know. It made me sit there and think for a while when I saw that stat. I can remember growing up and watching Michael Jordan and Reggie Miller, and especially the Indiana Pacers and the New York Knicks and that rivalry, and you throw in the Chicago Bulls, and grew up the era with Charles Barkley and Tim Duncan, well, not Tim Duncan, but David Robinson and Magic Johnson and Larry Bird and all these great players. And you see Michael Jordan, who's labeled, in many, many, many people's eyes, the greatest player of all time in the NBA. And for those that don't have him greatest all time, he's still at least second, third on their list. And to know he was only player of the week like 20-something times, like 26 times, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, God, is LeBron James really that much better than everybody else in the league? And one of the greatest of all times? Like, is that an argument we can legitimately have? Even being a LeBron fan and being a Cleveland fan, I don't know if I would label him as the greatest all time. But when you win 54 of them, either you got to be some kind of greatness, or this league doesn't have the talent. And I know that the league has gone soft, and we've seen that with these calls and the flops. Like I just couldn't imagine players the size of LeBron James and the size of James Harden and the size of these players that are just falling to the ground for no reason. Like, I couldn't imagine Charles Barkley doing it, or I couldn't imagine John Starks doing it. I couldn't imagine, I know there was some acting, and I know there was, at times that these players did flops, but not to the abuse that they do it. And, it was a much more physical game back in the day, too. And I just...
And the other thing with LeBron, while we're on that subject, CJ, that is impressive to me, and you say, is he that much better? yes, he's always in the media, but think about it. When is the last real negative media or negative news that came out about LeBron? The only thing I can remember on a national level, when I was, again, living in New York, was him when he went to Miami and announcing it on television, on ESPN and all that. That's the last real thing. And then, yeah, you had your haters, like anything else. But you very rarely see some negative things in the media about LeBron. He keeps to himself. He seemingly keeps to himself. And whenever you read something about him, it's usually about a statistic or, he's breaking a record somehow or something to do with his game, and it basically is positive. Leadership ability, maturity, it all plays into it, and you look at the difference, night and day, no pun intended, him and Johnny Manziel, and not just because they both were on Cleveland teams, but, Johnny Manziel was supposed to be so good as a quarterback, he flopped, and then you see a guy and he came out of college, and then you see a guy like LeBron who comes out of high school, and does he have his problems? I'm sure he does, but you don't hear about it, you don't see it, and basically it's not written about because he's got so much going for him in a positive sense that more things positive come up about LeBron than the negative. That's what I'm trying to say. Whereas you have Manziel, as soon as he steps out of his house or apartment, something goes wrong for him, and he's his worst enemy. But then you have a guy like LeBron who not only plays well, which is the important thing, but also conducts himself, maturely. And it's
oh, yeah. The only two things I ever recall coming out of his career that were marked. Well, one of them was a black mark, and the other one was just a question. I know there was questions surrounding his, if I'm not mistaken, his mom having a Humvee while he was in high school, and where that came about. But outside of that, the decision.
Okay, yeah, that was. I even forgot about that. But that and the ESPN thing would be the two things that I remember.
He does a lot of community service. There's a lot of things that he is. And they had this discussion last year when it's comparing Steph Curry's wife to LeBron James' wife. Like, you couldn't pick out. You couldn't pick out LeBron James' wife in a lineup unless you knew who she was. Steph Curry, because his wife and her gapping at the gums, you knew who she was. You know what she looks like, and he has his family conduct in the proper professional way. Like, that's like the perfect model of way a family professional when it comes to sports. Like they should conduct themselves out of the spotlight, out of trouble. A secret, I'm not going to say secret life, but a life that doesn't involve all the drama and all the social media and everything else. And like I said, I'm not going to say that he's the best all time, but it just looking at that stat, it just makes you wonder even if it's both, was it one way or the other, or in which way is it more? Is it he's really that great, or is it really is it more the fact that the talent level is not as good?
The other thing, CJ, while we're on this, and I just thought of this too off the top of my head, which is, but basically he has done for two teams what Michael Jordan did for one. when you consider that he brought a title to Miami when he was there, and he also came back and did it for Cleveland. So he's, if you want to make a comparison there, you could say he's one up on Michael there, although Michael has 6, so it's going to take him a while. But still, you could say that LeBron did for 2 teams what Michael Jordan did for 1. And, LeBron is not done by any stretch of the imagination. So, heaven knows how many he's going to end up with, at this stage in terms of titles. But that's another thing there. And then, another topic I wanted to touch on, CJ, was you talk about negatives, and this is a sad one. I posted all weekend the things that I learned of the Jose Fernandez situation, the boat crash. During the World Series, all this comes out as well, but that they find cocaine in his system and alcohol. So you talk about maturity, and I know nothing, obviously the kid was a good pitcher, but I know nothing about his maturity level except that obviously he had some problems in that area if he's messing with cocaine and that. Alcohol is one thing, but the cocaine is a little bit concerning.
Do you think that changes public opinion of the player? I mean, when it all happened, there was, all the team did, and, a lot of fans, in sorrow and, sad to see this player go, but does that start to change people's opinions, knowing that the reason he died was because, well, I'm not going to say because, but with the possibility of that having something to do with it, knowing that he had cocaine and alcohol in the system?
No, I just think it's sad, because based on his age too, okay, he wasn't as mature. Here you go back to LeBron again, there are just the way people carry themselves regardless of age. LeBron being young, you didn't see the youth in LeBron, okay? In terms of a lack of maturity, and yet, from anything that we read, and again, I'm not anywhere close to Miami Marlins, situation, or even been to Miami, but as far as you wonder about the maturity and who was around him, and did somebody, there was nobody around him to say, to have a guiding force in this kid, to have him get involved in this, or even, so it's sad more than anything. I don't think it changes people's opinion. Maybe it does. I don't know. It doesn't necessarily change mine in terms of his playing ability. It's just, in this case, I find it sad. And then, because he had the 2 friends with him, that you basically, you and 2 other people died basically needlessly, and whereas if you or I got into a boat, I'll speak for myself, if I had the ability to drive a boat and I went into drive a boat, I would hope that I would have the brains not to, overly, get drunk on alcohol or definitely cocaine, and not put myself in that situation. And that's where you have to wonder who was around him that didn't, maybe someone did and he didn't listen. I don't know. I don't know what the situation was. But all I know is when I read that, it was sad. And it was sad that it happened to begin with, and if it just had been alcohol, But it's doubly sad to know that this kid had a cocaine problem too. So.
Mm-hmm. It is. Being an outsider and really not knowing, how things are done, how the structure is, it just makes me question how do teammates and players not notice? Like, I don't know. I would just think it's probably not the first time that, there was alcohol and coke involved in some kind of event that involved him. And I know that everybody has their own private lives, and, I've been bamboozled myself, but nothing that hardcore. So I just question how do you not notice, how do you not know especially your employees? I think that especially the millions of dollars that you're paying, that there would be some kind of, I don't know what word I'm looking for. I don't know. I would have better keep players.
That's the thing I'm saying. It's not so much, I mean, you drew a parallel to yourself and what you've gone through in a sense, but I'm thinking of, when this first happened and he passed away and died, and all the stories that came out, oh, he was such a good guy, and all the teammates were rallying around. That's where I have a problem, not so much what they rallied around, but where were you? And maybe you did. I'm not putting the whole bunch of teammates down, but all those teammates, the thing we'll never know, okay, I guess is how to put this, we'll never know, did they, or at least one of them, go up to him and say, hey, you're going to end up in a bad way here. If they were so, proud to be around him, did anybody step up privately and say to him, what's going on, or did someone attempt to guide him? Now, I'm not putting anyone down, CJ. For all we know, someone did and he didn't listen, That's a possibility too, a very good one. So I'm just wondering about that. If because everybody was rallying around after the fact, and you wonder if anybody had the guts to step forward when he was doing this, or if they knew he was doing this, did anyone step forward? That's like a question we'll never have answered, I guess.
I'm just looking at something. Got sidetracked that the article out of USA Today today. This Chase Lax drawing. I know I'm shifting gears. Just kind of catch my attention. This Chase Lax drama in motion, and that's a problem for NASCAR. The first 2 years of the Chase, the Sprint Cup 2.0 format, the elimination style tournament with one race championship was filled with memorable moments, dramas, tempers, and entertainment. Just because this caught my attention, and we can jump back to what we was talking about with Fernandez. Do you feel that this year's Chase is lacking the excitement, the drama, the build-up?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess it varies by week. This last race at Martinsville, again, the first thing I thought of when Johnson won, okay, and then you had Gordon last year, which was a Hendrick car, win Martinsville in the fall, and it's funny how things fall, CJ, because the first thing I thought of, among many things, about because I'm not a Johnson fan, but I'm not a Johnson hater either. I don't root for him one way or the other. I mean, he's definitely talented with 6 championships, and that team, you have to give them some form of credit because they've stuck together, and that whole thing where everybody else seems to be changing their, crew chiefs periodically. That team is pretty well stuck together, except for a few of the pit crew members here and there that you very rarely hear of dropping off during the season one year or another, and replacing somebody, and half the time you don't even hear about it or know about it until it's done. But the interesting thing when Johnson won yesterday, I was thinking, this is a Hendrick Motorsports track for both positive and negative reasons. If you think about, Rick Hendrick losing his son in that plane crash years ago, that happened going to Martinsville or coming back, whatever it was. But that was, a direct line to Martinsville Speedway. And then, you have most of the Hendrick drivers winning at Martinsville. I mean, you had Gordon, and I forget how many times Gordon won when he was in the 24. I know his last year in the 24 is the year he won, but I've talked about prior to that. But I know Jimmy's won. They made a thing about him having 9, grandfather clocks, and where do you put 9 clocks in your house? And on the threads, I made a statement that he probably puts 2 in his bathroom, or something. 2 bathrooms. If he has a house with 2 bathrooms in, he probably has 2 in his bathroom. But as far as that team seems to shine at Martinsville, and there again, you say Rick Hendrick wants to win there for double reason, because of his son and everything else. Or everybody points to that as a reason too that Hendrick wants to. They want the Hendrick Motorsports people to have a good showing, basically for Rick Hendrick, Martinsville every year. So that's a case of where, you want to the media again gets involved with that, and you want to have a good week for Rick Hendrick, and it always ends up that the Hendrick cars do well, or teams do well at Martinsville, it seems. And then even Denny Hamlin, that struck me too, that he was in the running. And again, not surprisingly, the 2 tracks that he, off the top of my head, well, there's 3. One was Pocono, I remember one year he did extremely well at. But the other 2, and traditionally that he does well, is, I don't know whether it's because he's home or what, but the Virginia tracks, either Richmond or Martinsville. And here, again, he was in the running till the very end again, yesterday. So I would say things played out pretty much as people expected them to at Martinsville yesterday, CJ. And as far as the chase overall, I think it varies by race. Sometimes race goes as you anticipate, and other times it doesn't. And it's just a week-to-week thing. But I don't think the chase is losing anything as far as maybe on a given race, maybe things are not as exciting one week as another. But I don't think the chase as a whole suffers. I think an interesting thing, if we talk about NASCAR, just as we look at bubble teams again, who's in trouble again? Well, Kevin Harvick is out of below the cutoff line. But here again, how many times have we said it, CJ, that Kevin Harvick shines when his back is against the wall. So I can see him in the last, the last race before the last 4. I can see him locking up. If he's not in contention before then, I can see him locking the position up, in the last race before Homestead, before the 4 that go to Homestead. I really can see, based on his history, him doing that. I don't know. I don't think the Chase loses anything overall, CJ. I just think it's a race. It goes by a race-to-race thing. One week can be more exciting than another, and you could have more things happen. I will
admit this year is not. I don't know. It don't seem like it's been built as much. I think NASCAR kind of hurt itself with the constant probations and stepping in instead of letting the boys be boys. We're not going to see the same excitement like we did last year with Joe Logano and Matt Kenseth. You kind of killed that. I understand that safety comes into a part of it, but at the same time, I think you went a little extreme with it. I think points kind of probably would have got his point across. Matt Kenseth wouldn't have made it into the next round because of the points. Or I think he was already eliminated anyway because that was the whole purpose anyway. But, I mean, there's other ways you could do it. Now you kind of eliminate some of what the drivers are willing to do. And also I think you've lost some of that by losing Tony Stewart and a couple other drivers. But I don't know. I'm not going to say that it's hurting, but I don't know. Part of me wants to feel that, yes, this year the excitement isn't there like it has been in past years. There hasn't been any kind of standout rivalry like we've seen the prior 2 chases. There was fist fights. There was, post caution situations and retaliations and stuff like that. We're not seeing that this year. I don't know if just nobody's really pushed those buttons. I don't know if it's got to do with the drivers that started to push some buttons, like Ryan Newman and Tony Stewart going to the chase. Since they weren't really relevant, they just never built anything, and they just kind of, all right, whatever. As quickly as that came and died, it almost made you seem like it almost kind of seemed like it was staged to try to build some kind of rivalry going into it. It's Tony Stewart and his long lost friend, his longtime friend, that former, Stewart Haas Racing driver Ryan Newman. It's almost like it was staged. It never caught fire, and so we didn't hear nothing after, that week about it. There's not really been. I don't know if the drivers are just. I really don't know why. I just know that, we've not seen the excitement, or I'm not saying excitement, we've not seen the rivalry, we've not seen the heated, confrontations. Like, it's not the same because we don't have that.
Right. Well, I think what you said in the beginning when you started this, we started talking about the chase, when you brought up the chase, was not so much the rivalries, but who got eliminated from the chase. And I think if you look at, there were a lot of fans that wanted to see Tony Stewart advance in his last year. And there was a lot of fans, I know I was one of them, that was pulling hard for Chase Elliott. And basically those competitors, those racers are no longer in the chase. So I think that may contribute a little bit to it. It's not enough that, you and I being race fans, in addition to being show hosts, co-hosts, are not, are not going to say, oh, so-and-so's not in it, I'm not going to watch. No, we're race fans, we're NASCAR fans. But I think for those fans that their driver is eliminated, maybe at the end they are not as, interested, say, as they would be if, Tony Stewart's fans maybe aren't as interested in who wins the championship if Tony's out of it. I mean, there are people like that are just there for their, for the driver that they're fans of. So I think that might have something to do with it. Also, if you look at, and something I didn't post because it wasn't really tremendously brought up, but it was brought up that Jeff Gordon in his last, hopefully his last, you said this about retirement how many times, his last race with Hendrick Motorsports finishes 6th. Well, that's kind of nice, except Jimmy finished first, and that's going to be, the headlines and everything else. But, so, like I said, I think if Jimmy and Jeff would have finished 1 and 2, maybe in the race, that would have been more of a headline in terms of the Hendrick Motorsports people. I just think, like you said, it depends on what happens, really. And like you say, there's not a lot of that Brad Kozlowski, confrontation by the trailers or by the motorhomes type of deal going on. And I don't know. Maybe you need a Kevin Harvick to liven things up a little bit once in a while. I don't know, but I think he's got his mind, especially now, more on making it than anything else, because now he's back in the, in the last 4. I mean, if he was number 1, maybe you'd hear more from Kevin Harvick right now. I think, I don't know. I understand what you're saying, but I don't look at it as I don't look at it as, oh, I won't watch or anything like that. I understand what you're saying, though, that I think for the individual fan, something more has got to be done, maybe, to make it more interesting. And we'll see what happens with this tweak, with what they do in the future as far as the chase races, and not just saying the Xfinity races versus the Sprint Cup drivers. We'll see what happens when they get down, and they're always doing something. NASCAR is always doing something with tweaking it to make it better. So we'll see what happens. But I don't. I guess it's what you originally said, CJ, is that the rivalries are not there as much this year because either those people are on the sidelines as far as being out of the chase, or they're not known for being verbal. The Brad Kozlowskis or the Tony Stewarts definitely with the interviews and so forth. I don't know, but I think it's sick. Here again, it's cyclical. Now next year, depending on who makes it, you could have 8 very popular guys make it. And if Junior comes back, there we go. There's like 50% of the fan base coming back already. It all depends on what happens. That's year to year, I think, and now race to race. Do
you think
as we get down to the end?
Do you think we'll see Jeff Gordon in a race car next year? Do you think he's finally retired? Or do you think there's a possibility, say something, Earnhardt gets in a wreck next year, back under concussion protocol, probably finish out the year? I'm assuming they're going to start off the year with Junior. Say something happens in the year, he's got to step out of the car again. He has done this is the last chance. They know that physically he can't handle it, so they got to fulfill that ride for the rest of the year with sponsorship. Do we see Jeff Gordon in the car or any other car, possibly in Hendrick Motorsports next year for any reason, or is he finally done racing?
An interesting point, CJ, because, and I will say why. Again, not necessarily am I pro Jeff or anti Jeff, but I remember when he stepped into the car for Junior this year, and whether it's Junior next year or somebody else, like even Casey Kane, but Casey Kane is signed up for next year at least. I remember him saying in the news conference, I guess it was where the first one that he participated in, they said to him, "What made you come back?" And he said, and I quote, we're pretty close to it, if it's not a direct quote, pretty close to what I remember him saying because I was watching the news conference. He said, "I will do anything that Rick Hendrick asked me to do." So that to me means, to answer your question, if Rick Hendrick calls him to sit in for somebody or basically, to be totally facetious, to clean the men's room, I think Jeff Gordon would do it. But I know what you're saying. To sit in for any other driver, I could see it happening. I really could. Again, if Junior would have to, I think if Junior were to, get hurt again, especially if it was another concussion, I think he would have to consider, retiring if it happened like next year. If he came back for like one more year and it happened again, Junior was cautious this year. What more, how much more cautious could he be? That's an interesting point. And could Jeff Gordon sit in for any Hendrick personnel member or driver? Definitely, I could see Rick Hendrick asking him to do it. Now, would he do it? Based on what he said earlier this year, the answer would be yes, unless Ingrid sat down with him and the family had real reservations with him coming back. That's yet to be seen. But I think, if it just meant the phone call, would you come back, I could see him doing it, CJ, based on what he said.
No, this is it.
I know. You have voiced those sentiments before, my friend. Yeah.
It's funny. I grew up being a Gordon fan. I liked them back in the Busch Grand Nationals. I'm sorry, there's a certain sports I can't watch the same person I win all the time. And when you watch Gordon win double-digit figures and wins the third of the season, it just gets old. And so it's not necessarily anything against Gordon other than he lost his competitive he just lost his competitive edge, and it's not so much that it's his fault. It's got to do with age, priorities, family is a priority now, and everything else. It's he put in a full career, and it's not even completely all that I don't want to see Gordon back in a car. A lot of it's got to do with why not look towards the future. Why are you holding on to the past? There's no doubt in my mind if they would have put Alex Bowman in all of the races, the sponsorship still would have been there because it's the 88 machine in Hendrick Motorsports. It might have been a question at first on maybe every race from one sponsor, but after watching Alex Bowman week in and week out that he did with the races he did do, he was going to get top 5, top 10, top 15 finishes. So he very rarely finished outside. I think the last race that he ran in Talladega, he was up front until a tire or something ended up happening and cost him a good finish. I just don't get why you're holding on to the past. An organization that has really not been talked a lot about. Yes, Jimmy Johnson has found victory lane twice in the chase, and if I'm not mistaken, in the season he won at least one race as well. But when it comes to consistency, when it comes to a team as a whole, Hendrick Motorsports has really not been in the conversation. It's been Joe Gibbs Racing. It's been Penske Racing. It's been the 78 team, and I know they're a pilot team, but that's a whole team within itself. There's been other Stewart-Haas Racing. There's been other teams that have been getting those conversations that that Hendrick Motorsports once upon a time would consume and monopolize. And yes, you got Chase Elliott out there that is part of your future. You're still holding on to the past, though. You got Jimmy Johnson, which I'm not saying get rid of Jimmy Johnson, but Jimmy Johnson in the latter part of the career. Dale Jr. now for two of the last 3 seasons or so, he's not been able to complete the whole season due to his injury issues and the fact that he's 40. And you got Casey Kane who's past his prime, which I understand that those guys bring in some sponsorship, but you're starting to fall behind the cue ball as Joe Gibbs Racing has got 4 drivers in this round of 8 and have won probably twice as many races and just coming off a championship and has been dominating in the headlines is the exact opposite of what we've gotten out of Stewart-Haas Racing, out of Hendrick Motorsports Racing, is you got 1 guy in the final 8. The other 3 guys have not been talked about a lot other than Chase Elliott, but that's just because he's a rookie. I think outside of that, we wouldn't have made really that big deal about it. So we've had other drivers that finish in the top 5 to 15th on a consecutive basis, and we don't make a big deal and talk about them all the time like we did Chase Elliott. And we see now with Danica over the years, it's gotten less and less with her. And unless Chase Elliott finds victory lane, I think that over years he'll get talked less. I don't know. I just, instead of putting a driver in your car that has retired to replace a driver that is getting on the edge of retirement, why not find out what you have out there to move forward to? Why not make Alex Bowman your permanent relief driver instead of bouncing the back and forth between them two? So hey, if Alex Bowman ain't got a contract at the end of the year, let's put him in our development program, or let's let's find a way to make him part of our stable so nobody else gets him. If it be, we do 2 Xfinity Series cars, or we do a split schedule with William Byron, or whatever the case may be. Or, okay, let's get him signed. Let's look, Earnhardt, Jr., let's plot out a plan on how we're going to do this. You got to start, I don't know, to me, you got to start working on the future, because if you hold on to the present, you're going to be like Jack Roush Racing, where they thought they were on top of the world with Greg Biffle, Carl Edwards, and Matt Kenseth, and coming close to winning championships. And Kenseth, I believe, won a championship with Jack Roush Racing. And you were content with that. You kept holding on to the past. You kept holding on to what you had. And Kenseth finally moved on. Edwards finally moved on. And Greg Biffle has not been a serious threat, I don't think, ever since we've had this chase, if I recall, but has not really been a serious threat in a long time, at least. And they're a prime example of holding on to the past for too long. And unless Hendrick Motorsports starts looking to the future and start game planning, they're going to be left in the dust. I know that's saying a lot with Joe Gibbs Racing having Kenseth and Edwards, who are in the later part of their career, and adding Denny Hamlin, who's been around for, I think, almost 10 years, I think 2007 as well, and Kyle Busch kind of being your young buck. But you also got to look at their development program. They're already geared for the future with your Eric Joneses and your Daniel Suarez and everybody else that is affiliated with Kyle Busch Motorsports and Joe Gibbs Racing. They've kind of developed them a farm system well far in advance and are working on that. At some point, there's got to be a transition, and you got to start thinking about the future versus trying to hold on to the present or the past.
Right. I'm sorry, CJ, I'm back. I lost you there for a minute. But yeah, I get what you're saying, and you know, it's just that's just based on what I heard. To go back to what I was saying before I got cut off or lost the signal. You know, I heard that back when he stepped in for Junior, and I don't know. It's you gotta rely. I think NASCAR is missing a boat when we talk about. We have Mark Red on every week now. You know, they should go to people like him and say, who do you have? Or do you have anybody that you think is ready to go up? You know, and those are the people they should, you know, concentrate on a little bit, you know, because there's certainly, we have them on the program constantly, CJ. There's certainly drivers with talent that all they need is a break. You know, all they need is to be seen. And the more times you put somebody in a car, and they'll knock on him, he's had his career, he's had success in his career, like a Gordon, and what's the word? I don't want to say regurgitate, but that's the wrong word. Recycle all these guys. You're ignoring the people like the people that Mark Rett has, or you know, Mason, you know, all these guys we have on the shows that you know, your shows specifically and mine, but you know, more so yours in terms of the guys like Mark Rett and Mason Mitchell is who I was thinking of. Mason Mitchell, you know, guys like this that have these drivers that are, if not ready, they're at least, you know, that's their goal, to move up. And the more you recycle a Jeff Gordon or some other veteran and put them in a car, you're taking an opportunity away from these guys and girls.
I just don't get it. I'm not sure why you hold on to the past. Why not? There's too much talent out there, and not testing the waters and not finding out what's out there and what would work in your program, your organization. Is all it's going to do is hurt you and make you fall behind everybody else. And we've seen team after team do that. You know, we saw the Wood brothers for the longest time not be able to have a full season because they were behind the ball. You can say what you want to say, but with the history behind that name and as competitive as they could be, if they weren't behind the ball, somebody would have gave them, you know, a full ride sponsorship. We watched Rouse Racing fall behind. We've seen Richard Petty Motorsports never get ahead and never get up to where they need to be because they're bouncing around. I mean, Eric Amarello was somebody that was supposed to be up and coming, and obviously they kind of misjudged that one. But a lot of their names have been, you know, names that just never made it or has been. And
I think that's a mystery and we've brought it up at least twice that I know of. Twice or three times that we've been discussing why Richard Petty can't get a named driver in his you want to call it a stable, a garage area, whatever. He and also Roush. I think those are the two mysteries of why they have not been able to, you know, get a named driver in there since Roush hasn't been good, in my opinion, since Mark Martin left. They really haven't replaced Mark Martin with anybody that was consistent, and Mark was for a time. And, you know, he might have lost something, too, with age. I mean, after all, he was over 50 when he left, okay? But he was competitive for a long, long time, and then he left, and Edwards left, and that's when Edwards was there, too, and I can remember when he came on with the 99, and he was the in thing for about 2 or 3 or 4 years, and then when he left Roush, they never, I mean, Greg Biffle was good, but I mean, experience and circumstance shows that maybe Greg Biffle is not, suited to be a number one guy. I mean, he can be on a team and be productive, but I don't think when everybody else left and the only person there was Greg Biffle, he hasn't really held his own enough to be, a representative of the brand, say, of the team. And he is the only person, that was asked to step to the forefront. And I don't think, no knock on him as a driver, but I don't think he's a number one guy in terms of a face for an organization. And maybe that's, I think that has been shown, that's been proven if you look at, Roush's record since he's been there.
I kind of feel bad for Jamie Collins, linebacker for the New England Patriots. Went to bed last night, was part of the 7-1 first place New England Patriots. Wake up today and find out now you're part of the 0-8 Cleveland Browns. Kind of feel bad for him.
Well, you got somebody else to root for anyway, CJ. I saw that right before we went on the air, right before we went on the show here. Yeah, that's like being on from the penthouse to the outhouse in one swift drop, unfortunately. But I don't know.
What did he do to piss off Bill Belichick? That your ultimate punishment is go to the 0-8 Cleveland Browns.
He's probably thinking, "Oh man, why did I do it in practice that last drill?" God knows what happened, but anyway, that's kind of what I was mentioning when we were discussing at one point the New England Patriots, is that people very rarely get cut from them. There's got to be some drop-off in performance, or you've got to do something to alienate the coach in order to be jettisoned in the middle of the season, even traded. Or you don't see that happening with New England. So obviously, well, I'm going to say obviously, apparently, let's put it that way, because it's not obvious what happened, but apparently he did something that was anti-rule or something, and maybe we'll find that out later on. Maybe I always mention Peter King because he's one of the better writers of football that I follow, and maybe I'll find out something and post it from one of his dispatches. But usually it's something that the player does, unfortunately, either internally or on the field or something that would make him or the organization trade him away so swiftly like that. Now, God knows, maybe something happened in the game that we're not aware of that was caught on. But I'm saying that will come out in the media in the next couple of days, and I'll definitely keep my eye on that as well.
The Cleveland Indians, the Chicago Cubs took main stage on Sunday night in the ratings game, World Series Game 5, trounces Sunday Night Football, which was a good game last night. So it wasn't like it was a bad matchup. Do you think people just tuned in to see if the curse continued on for the Chicago Cubs, or to see if they could survive, and that's where the ratings got a boost? Do you think there's actually legitimacy in the ratings of the Chicago Cubs and the Cleveland Indians? I don't know. I just don't visualize this being two teams a lot of people go out of their way to go watch, unless you're looking to see if the curse got broke, or if it continues on, or just people tired of the product they've been seeing in the NFL. Like, why do you think that where we saw such a rating difference between the Game 5 of the World Series versus Sunday Night Football, which was a competitively fun game to watch?
I think in the sense of the World Series, everybody was, knowing that it could virtually end if Cleveland had won last night. And I think a mid-season, even in-season football game, especially given the two, well, I can't say that because Dallas is America's team and so forth, but I think put up against one another, I think people were watching because, as far as the World Series, because of, Cleveland potentially locking it up. I know what I did. I had the baseball game on, and I had the football scores on, because ESPN has their website has. I had that on my phone while I was watching the TV of the World Series. Has the down and so forth, and what the situation is with each game. So I had like the football game on my phone and the baseball game on TV, and vice versa, because I was, I was rooting, to the extent that I've had a rooting interest, I would like to see Cleveland win, if for nothing else than for you, CJ. And knowing I, co-host the show with you, I knew it was going to be obviously a source of discussion, and especially seeing Miss Lee put things all over Facebook like "Go Tribe." I knew you were both into it, so I was watching, with that in mind too. But I think overall it was because it was World Series versus football, and knowing that there's more to the football season, and it could possibly have been the end of baseball for this year. I think that contributed to people watching the World Series.
I don't know. It just it makes you wonder what call, like I said, because it was a rivalry game. It was a good game. The Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. And I agree. A lot of it probably had to do with the fact that it was possibly the last game of the World Series. A lot of people wanted to see whether or not Chicago is going to live to see another day. Can they end this 109 years or whatever it is? What was the last time they won? Some ridiculous amount of years ago.
The Cubs, 1908. Yes.
Yeah. So 108 years ago. I mean, there's a lot of things, I guess, that factor into it. I thought, with the NFL season being in the middle of the season, the implication of this game, I understand that the World Series was probably going to outrate it, but I figured it wouldn't have been a big difference. I figured it probably would have been a close, competitive rating, because all the Dallas fans out there, all the Eagles fans out there, Sunday night game, the competitively close game, playoff implications, even at this early in the season. I just figured that it had been at least a close game.
I'm sitting here thinking, too, CJ, that you mentioned the New England linebacker that went to the Browns. This is the other side of the coin last night, because the guy that came in for the Cubs, I believe, in the 7th inning from the bullpen is a guy on the Yankees, and this season the Yankees not as strong as they've been in the past. Not that I'm a Yankee fan, I'm a Met fan, but I obviously, living in New York, know that the Yankees have been disgustingly successful for years. But this has not been a good year for them. And this guy went from the Yankees to the Cubs, and here he's, got a chance to extend the series, and he did it, So that's the other side of the coin, the guy going from the outhouse to the penthouse. And not that it helps your tribe, Eddie, but he's the guy that came in and nailed down the win. So it's the other side of the coin to what we were discussing before.
Virginia State Police identified the driver who struck several pedestrians in the parking lot at Martinsville Speedway as 65-year-old Gary T. Edmond of Fairfax, Virginia, who was taken into custody after an incident which sent nearly 20 people to local hospitals and charged with one count of reckless driving, a Class 1 misdemeanor in Virginia. It stated that alcohol is not believed to be a factor in the accident. This had occurred in the handicapped parking area outside of Turn 2 off the Speedway about an hour after Jimmy Johnson won the race. The parking lot was congested with vehicles and pedestrians when a 2005 Chevrolet SSR convertible attempted to pass a Jeep Liberty. The Chevrolet struck the Jeep and then struck several nearby pedestrians.
That was confusing to me for two reasons, CJ, and I'll tell you why. I read it, and I was going to post it, but I was going to ask you first, because it was confusing. I don't know whether how I read it was confusing or how it was written was confusing. First of all, I know that sporting events draw crowds, but if a car got out of, especially, we're not talking about a race car, we're talking about in the parking lot, for gosh sakes, that one car would hit 22 people in one shot seems almost incomprehensible. But that being said, they said that the people were waiting at a heliport. Now, if I could be corrected, obviously, isn't a heliport on a roof? That was or on.
They're waiting on a heliport. That might just been something they classified where the shuttle bus picked them up at or something. That might just been the name of it or something. Because I'm assuming that what ended up happening is somebody lost their patience, tried to pass a car, didn't clear it, clipped it, and hit a bunch of people that happened to be grouped or walking or something on the side of the road. And for those that anybody's been to that part of it, well, once that race lifts out, there's a crap ton of people walking down the side of the road and through the parking lot. I'm just kind of curious that said about an hour after, and usually about an hour after the race is pretty cleared out for the most part. That part, the parking lot might not be cleared out, but right around the track, and most of the people that are still there are sitting in traffic at that point, not just hanging out. So I thought that part of it was kind of weird to me, to know that there was still that big of a group somewhere not back at their cars an hour after the race.
Yeah, well, when I saw, I could deal with, not to say deal, but I could see where, 3 people at once, 4 people at once. But when they said 22 people were involved, I'm like, whoa, that's a little bit excessive. But anyway, and then also to add to what you said, just the idea or the addition of what you said, that, most of the people have left an hour after that. So that there was a couple of things confusing when I read that story. But, aside from the obvious, which the main thing is that the people got hit, number one. But, that's the most important thing. But I just found 22 people strange, and as you brought up, even the idea that many people would still be around an hour after the race.
I mean, it's been quite a few times that I've been there that late after a race, but usually that's involving the fact that I'm at the media center and, I'm waiting for the third place and then the second place and the first place finisher to finally make it in the media center and give their talk and, wrap up any articles or social media stuff or anything else that I have going on. But I've never been at a track an hour after the race, still making my way back to the car. I've at least made it back to my car. I don't want to say I always rush back to get to my car because I know unless I leave like immediately as things are wrapping up and shoot out, there's been times as the checker flag is being dropped, I'm headed out the back door, making my way back to the car, especially if I have like media parking or parking as close to the media center, and I know that I want to be one of the first ones to get back to the car and I can get going and beat the traffic. But usually, if I'm there, unless I'm hanging out in the media, I'm not in the media center. I'm not there for an hour after the race, no matter if I'm working it or if I'm hanging out. At least I'm not hanging out an hour after the track trying to get back to the car. Usually I'm back to the car, whether or not I'm in traffic or not. That's a whole different thing.
Right. The only people that I would, again, and I'm a member of the media too, and being in a wheelchair, sometimes I do wait for, especially if there's crowds involved, wait till they empty out, and then I leave, or because of my situation. But the interesting thing is, the only people that I would think would be there an hour afterwards, other than media, like you said, would have been the drivers, and they're in their motor coaches, so they're not in the parking lot. So that's another thing that was interesting to me with that whole story.
Did we cover all the topics you shared on Facebook? We nail all those out?
I think so. If you go down your timeline, I think we basically covered Durant. There was a golf tournament, although I didn't write a whole article on it, solely because a lot wasn't mentioned. I got one article posted by ESPN that I put up that an interesting thing, and I know you don't follow golf, CJ, like other people might, and I don't follow it, haven't followed it all that much until, like I said, college and on back, or on forward from college. A Chinese Asian, I should say, won in Shanghai, China, and it was the first time an Asian won in China, at least for the PGA, which I found rather interesting. And again, I will start or restart doing my personal articles when they're back in the U.S., only because it's much easier to get access off the PGA website as to what happened, and of course they'll be on TV more when they come back to the United States, which in this case will be, I believe, in the next 2 weeks. They have a tournament in Las Vegas that'll start up again, and they'll be back in the States. So I will reestablish my articles then, and if it's this week, it'll be this week. But just another thing before we get off the racing, and I thought it was interesting that Ann brought this up the other night, CJ, about, and we've touched on it here and there. You talk about the topics, and I don't know if I put this down specifically to you as a topic tonight, but it came across my mind as I'm thinking of the show last week as well, with Ann being on and being a track owner, about the use of social media and how often that comes up with on your show too, in terms of negativity and what should be written about and what shouldn't be mentioned. And her mentioning or bringing up the fact that if you have a knock on a track or a knock on a sporting event, you shouldn't really, she was speaking specifically of tracks, obviously, because of the nature of my show and, Steve's show and same the racing shows. But the positive versus the negative use of social media, and it was brought, I guess the spotlight was put on it Friday night, and then also because of the nature of the event they had over the weekend, that as soon as people put it on Facebook about Bob Finan having the event over the weekend to salute his 40 years in auto racing, that was a positive, and everybody was, congratulating him. And then the negative part, which she brought out that night, Friday night, was about, knocking a track if you have a problem, either if you're a fan with the cost or how the races are conducted. You should go directly to the promoter or the owner. And I personally had Ann on, one track owner who I know personally is her honest about her desire to have an open door policy, and I'm sure Eddie is the same way at Riverhead. And the driver feedback, as we've heard on my show continuously this year, CJ, is positive. So you shouldn't really knock a track in social media because that reflects bad on the sport and on the track itself, and could lead to negative publicity, which then leads to, down the road, the track closing. And if anything, we want to keep these local tracks alive. So that being said, I'll get off my soapbox on that one, but I just thought, that crossed my mind as I was listening to her the other night as well, CJ. I don't know if you got the same vibe off it, but she is definitely pro-social media for the good things, and definitely against people using it to knock, events and tracks specifically.
Social media in sports is just a funny thing. It's as helpful and as good as it can be, it does just as much damage. And we talked a little bit about it earlier with Steph Curry's wife and how ignorant she ended up making herself look and sound because of social media. And I just have this thing that I feel that athletes and family of athletes really need to stay away from social media, especially if they've not been properly, educated. And I know it's kind of an oxymoron because a lot of these drivers we have on the show, that's how we keep up with them, and that's how they get their name out there, social media. Now the fans can keep up with them. But if I know it's a fine line, because as long as you're educated, and basically as long as you got somebody there that is kind of overseeing the account, make sure you don't do anything stupid, then yes, it's a very beneficial thing. But unfortunately, you have family members of athletes that, didn't get that same education on social media etiquettes 101, and you got some athletes out there that have not got that same training, and they put their foot in their mouth and makes their own life difficult when it's time for a new contract or looking to go to a different team or whatever the case may be. It's kind of one of those things that, damned if you do it, damned if you don't. And, I want to sit there and say, hey, I feel all athletes need to stay off social media because there's nothing that usually comes good of social media when it comes with athletes. But at the same time, I know firsthand with all the guests that we've had on the last 5.5 years how beneficial social media can be. And we've seen some, people get their shot because of social media or get the publicity due to them because of social media. And so, it's kind of a catch-22 on it.
I can go with how we use it, CJ, or I'll even boil it down since we're, pointing at different people. Okay, that's on the pro level. But I know I use my Twitter account basically to thank people for coming, either informing people that the show, who's going to be on the show, and then thanking the people personally. First of all, the ones I know, I get on the phone afterwards, or I text immediately afterwards when we get off the show. And this is speaking on Friday night now. The ones I know personally, which are a majority of the ones, obviously, which is how I get them to come on in the first place. And I always say thank you and so forth. And they are, a lot of them are the first ones to say, gee, thanks, Mike, for letting us come on. And so that's a positive of it. And I'm very, very careful in terms of putting negative things out there. Not again that there are negative things other than, unfortunately, things that happen like with Jose Fernandez, but that's, again, not speaking personally. That's things I'm putting up from other articles and so forth. But even that, I do a little bit of editing in terms of, I've said many times, to use one example, Colin Kaepernick, after you've, read about 16 or 18 things on Colin Kaepernick, would you put 17 things up, So in that respect, I do a little editing on what I put on the pages, but you have to be extremely careful, CJ, and that goes without saying. But it can be, like you said, especially on the local level and the drivers we have on, and even Steve and so forth, the drivers that they have on their program on Thursday night, same deal between Chris and Steve. Those are, if it wasn't for social media, a lot of them wouldn't be known except in their general area, in the South or, in the Mississippi, Louisiana area, like Chris was saying, or like Steve had the gentleman on last week. In my case, in the New England area, if you didn't come from, the Northeast, you wouldn't know about the modified guys, except, with rare exceptions, like Steve knew about Mario Fiore, and because they've run all over the place, and so forth. But so it's like anything else. If you use it in a positive way, it's a positive, and if you turn it into a negative, it can be negative too. And then the bad thing is you could almost destroy something. In the case of, racetracks, if you knock up a track too much, you could end up down the road seeing it close because the fans then read it and take it to heart and don't support something that's constantly knocked. So that's more or less what Ann was trying to, pursue. I think that level. Like, don't knock the track, because sooner or later it'll be gone if you knock it too much. I think that was her general idea of that that situation on Friday night.
Speaking of Colin Kaepernick, and I know a lot of people are pointing fingers at Colin Kaepernick as the reason why the NFL ratings are down. Do you feel the same way as a lot of fans out there? I mean, I don't feel that what one person does on the sideline really reflects. It might hurt the 49ers, depending, and it's California, so it's not quite a conservative state, so I don't really even think it hurts the 49ers. I think the lack of having any talent on that team and having two garbage quarterbacks and a coach that has really not proven himself at all is a lot of factor into why the 49ers don't have anybody come into their games. But I can't begin to believe personally that all these millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people or whatever the ratings are down stop watching the NFL because one man is kneeling while the national anthem is being played versus standing there and giving the respect. Yes, it's very disrespectful to the military. And I've said several times that's why I serve, for him to have that right. So even though I find it disrespectful, it's his right, so it is what it is. I just don't visualize that being the reason, and I'm not quite putting my finger on other unless it strictly has to do with the election. Why? Because there's been a lot of, as a matter of fact, three out of the 11 games that mattered because there was a tie in one. All three of the games that I lost, those teams were leading late in the game, fourth quarter, and ended up losing that game. So it's not like it's a bunch of garbage games going on. It's very competitive games. Yeah, there's some matchups that suck, such as the Thursday night Tennessee-Jacksonville game. But it's not like the NFL's putting out a bunch of garbage and it's just all going, It was not like we have a bunch of Carolina Panthers this year that had easy schedules and walked all over the schedule. They're just boring games to watch unless you're that fan. So do you think, because obviously the ratings are down, but the ratings are down for everybody. So it's not just the NFL. But do you think that the ratings has anything to do with Colin Kaepernick, or are you in the boat that I am, that this is just something for those fans that maybe are anti-Colin Kaepernick? They have something to throw out there. Well, the reason it's down is because of Colin Kaepernick, not because they actually believe that, or not that there's any statistics, any stats out there that's actually backing that up. Yes, people are going to answer the question, does it bother you, or if you're mad at the NFL when they have to answer that question, well, does Colin Kaepernick have any reason why you're not watching NFL? Well, yeah. But I think when it all breaks down, it is anti-Kaepernick you can be, or pro-American you can be, or anti-NFL you can be. When it comes down to it, if you got a choice of I'm going to watch the NFL or I'm not going to watch the entire weekend of NFL just because one player won't kneel down during the national anthem, I can't believe, and I can't bring myself to believe that the actual NFL fan, not the bandwagon fan, not the one that just has to tune in every once in a while, not the one that, only catches a few minutes of his own team, but the actual NFL fan that's vaguely what those stats are coming from. I can't believe in my heart that they're not tuning in just because of one person on one football team for most of the season that's been sitting on the bench, not standing up for the national anthem is the reason why the ratings are being affected at all.
No, I don't see that where TV is concerned, CJ. I think if that was going to happen, and potentially, first of all, there are two things. We've discussed, and not just because I come from New York and was born in Long Island, but if Colin Kaepernick, and I said it when it first happened, and we were discussing the difference between, New York and San Francisco or New York and any non-media center. I think if Colin Kaepernick played for another team in the New York metropolitan area, I think he would, by virtue of being there, I think he would attract more media attention. Being in San Francisco or anywhere other than a media center, I don't think that plays into it. I think what might play into it a little bit, if you don't talk about TV, everybody can get cable. Everybody watches football, and like you say, if you're even a non-San Francisco 49er fan, maybe you don't want to watch the 49ers, not just because of Colin Kaepernick, but because you're not a San Francisco fan. If you were a fan that bought tickets, maybe that, if you felt that strongly about what he was doing negatively, maybe you don't go to a few games. Or you don't buy tickets to a few games. But I think even that has more to do with economics than with what one guy is doing. And if the whole team is having a bad year, the 49ers are not going to draw because of their record or their lack of a win or their lack of a winning season. That's going to be the reason more than anything. So I don't think, like you say, one guy is going to, if the whole team was successful and this one guy was doing that, okay, he might be a sidebar somewhere, but I don't think that plays into it. I think the performance of the whole team as a whole is what might be contributing to it. And even back two weeks ago, because Shannon wasn't able to join us last week, I think 2 weeks ago he brought up the point of the election. And now after this week, we'll see just how much the election and the upcoming election, which is now the election as I guess this week, it'll be reflected after this week in the TV ratings, if anything jumps up sporting wise in terms of percentages. We'll see if Shannon was correct in that the election could be holding down viewership as far as sporting events, even on TV. So that's the two things that I'll be watching for.
I just find it, I don't know, I'm not going to say amusing, because I think it's actually kind of insulting to the intelligence of the fans and to those that, kind of pay attention. Pay attention. But the fact that, there's people out there, different media outlets, different, critics, different fans, that want to blame Colin Kaepernick for the reason that the NFL, and I've seen it on the timeline, I've seen different articles, and I'm just like, you guys are stretching so far for something, because I'm sorry, one guy on a 53-man roster out of 32 teams is not going to. If we can have someone such as Ben Roethlisberger, who's been charged multiple times for beating up women, we can have someone like Michael Vick, who's been arrested for raping dogs or having dogs raped, not him physically raping and dog fighting. If we can have Ray Rice just get a 4-game suspension, 2-game suspension, and still be allowed to be in the NFL after we watched on video, if we can go down the list of names of players and what they have done or been accused of, and that not hurt the ratings of the NFL. A silent protest during the national anthem for a player that has been a backup for most of the season on a team that is power ranked 31st, only worse to them is the Cleveland Browns. To blame anything when it comes to attendance, stats, viewers, or anything else on that particular player, to me, that and honestly say it with a straight face, that's kind of an insult. It's like you're slapping me in the face, giving me a bunch of bull crap, blow the smoke up my rear end, and expect me to believe that one person, against all those things that I've listed, is a reason why the NFL is suffering the numbers they are suffering.
Yeah, I don't. Like I said, I think, if you talk about, you have to talk about. If you're talking about Colin Kaepernick, you're talking about the San Francisco 49ers. And their overall record, as we've said from the beginning of the season, is not, this is not the Bill Walsh 49ers that were going to the Super Bowl behind Joe Montana and Steve Young all those years. Okay? This is far between or far below that era of team and that team. And again, that has more to do with, I want to say, the coaching staff, the drafting, the players that they're getting. There isn't a Roger Craig around. There isn't at least for the 49ers, there's not a Roger Craig around. There's not a Joe Montana around. There are not those people on that team anymore, or that even quality of player on that team anymore. And that's why their record is what it is. And like you said, it's the whole team that plays into whether they're good or bad, and not just what Colin Kaepernick does before a game,
Halfway through the second, and the Chicago Bears are up 13-0 on top of the Minnesota Vikings.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us picked. I don't think any of us picked the Bears, did we?
No, everybody picked Minnesota. I'm just curious to know what happened to the. What happened to the Minnesota Vikings? All of a sudden, things are starting to fall apart.
Yep, Sam Bradford is playing like the Sam Bradford of old. When they went 5-0, that's where I thought Sam Bradford was playing like, and now suddenly I picked Minnesota, and here we go. He's falling back into his old habits, I guess. I don't have the thing on the game because we're on the air, but I bet you if I look at the stats, Sam Bradford's not having a very good game. Somebody's having a bad game for Minnesota, that's sure.
Derek Carr, 40 of 59, 68.7%. Franchise record, 513 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions this week against Tampa Bay. Putting on a very good season so far, 2,321 yards, 17 touchdowns, a quarterback rating of 100.9. Just really having an outstanding season. 12 interceptions, kind of on the high side. Lost 4 fumbles. You have an opportunity right now to start a new franchise. You have the opportunity to have either Tom Brady, who's performed the way he's performed all these years, but in a perfect system. Now, you don't have the Bill Belichick system. You have the Mike Perricone system. Or you have an opportunity to start your franchise with Derek Carr in the beginning of his season, having the career he's had so far. Which quarterback do you take to start off your franchise with, Mike?
I think I take Derek Carr for a couple of reasons. And I'm not even talking about longevity because Brady is not injury prone at this point. He's not like Tony Romo. He's not been out due to injury. His situation is more or less, if you want to say, off the field or field related, but not related to injury per se.
Before you continue, I made a mistake, and I want to correct that before you make any point. I read his 2014. I was reading it back for 2014. He had the 21 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 4 fumble loss. This season, he's got 17 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions so far halfway through the year, and lost 2 fumbles with a 66.3 overall, even though he had almost 70% last weekend, 66% overall. But it is 17 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, not 21 and 12.
I'll tell you what I might do, CJ. I might take Tom Brady as a backup and have him mentor the kid. But Tom Brady wouldn't be leaving New England. I know that. But as far as that, I would take Derek Carr, just for the amount of years he has, ahead of him, and I won't even say my system because we won't even discuss what my system would be. I have no idea. But
better yet, is there a quarterback that you would rather have other than Derek Carr as we're at this year? As a matter of fact, Dak Prescott. Everybody's all in on Dak Prescott and what he has done over the Dallas Cowboys so far. Is that possibly a player that you would take over Derek Carr? Or is there any quarterback that you would take over Derek Carr at this point in their career?
I'm sure if I went down the list, again, it would all depend. I mean, I know we're talking theoretically or hypothetically. A lot of this has to do with, especially when you're young, okay? When you take a young quarterback, be it Derek Carr or the other one that sticks out to me in terms of being somewhat successful in college, off the top of my head, would be a Marcus Mariota, who was taking some heat, but you have to understand that he's from Tennessee. We're with Titans. So if you give him a team with a decent offensive line, would he be putting up Derek Carr-like statistics? That's what you have to look at. And again, if you take my hypothetical team, what's my offensive line look like? Does it have Joe Thomas on it? Does it have, the next Orlando Pace? Does it have, a fairly... Am I dealing with a team with a fairly decent offensive line? Because a lot of that has to do with the players around you. And I'm not trying to be cliche. It's the truth. When Tom Brady went in, and again, you see this again and again with New England. But to use that example, you had Drew Bledsoe, who was supposed to be such a great quarterback, okay? Then he sits down for Tom Brady, and he has the same line as Tom Brady has, but Tom Brady looks like a world beater because of the offensive line. So was it the offensive line that hurt Drew Bledsoe, or was it Drew Bledsoe's talent that hurt Drew Bledsoe? And Drew Bledsoe went on to other teams, specifically the Cowboys, like we're talking about the Dallas Cowboys, and didn't really do anything. So that's the talent of the person themselves. But also you have to look at the players around them, and it all plays into it. But based on your question, based on age, based on the years he has ahead of him, I would take Derek Carr for those reasons.
And I agree. As a matter of fact, there's not too many. There's not too many quarterbacks. As a matter of fact, I can't think of one off the top of my head that I would build my franchise around before I build it around Derek Carr. And that's to even include Russell Wilson, who's relatively young into his career, Cam Newton as well. I just like what I see out of Derek Carr is matured and developed really, really good in the short time that he's been in the NFL. And he just has this don't quit, don't die kind of attitude, and it's helped the Oakland Raiders continue to find ways to win football games. And I just think that he is probably, and for those that don't know, I've been pretty much all in on the Oakland Raiders since the beginning of the season. I did think they were quite ready to be AFC West champions. It all kind of depended on how the Denver Broncos, and that was my assessment at the end of last year. Going this year, we weren't really sure what Denver was going to do, but I felt that Oakland would give them a run for their money, at least at a minimum be a wild card team. But here we are, and Oakland is your division leader, and Oakland is showing us that maybe they are ready. I don't think they're Super Bowl bound ready. I think that they are AFC Championship ready. I think that outside of the New England Patriots, I don't think there's anybody else in the AFC when it comes down to it in a one-on-one, put your best foot forward game, such as a championship game. I don't think there's anybody outside of New England that's better in the AFC, and there's not too many teams that if they had a matchup in Super Bowl that I would take over the Oakland Raiders. I feel very confident what the Oakland Raiders have built out there, and they, offensively very stout. The 24-25 penalties they got this weekend, accepted penalties they got, I want to say it was 24. A bit much NFL record, and it's not one of the records you really want to have or be proud about. But they still have found a way to overcome those odds, able to still put up the numbers and be, victorious and put themselves in a position where, they kind of still control their own destiny. As long as you keep winning, obviously nobody else can take that spot from you. So, at this point, even though we're still halfway through the season, they control their destiny at this point. And I think they have set themselves up in a situation, that San Diego can't find that winning recipe. I don't know what it is about San Diego. We've seen years where they have been really good all season long and then just fall apart in the playoffs. We've seen seasons where they've barely, been able to come back and make the playoffs and actually win a game in the playoff and then lose. Or we would just see them fall apart, such we have the last couple of years. Kansas City, you've got a game-managing quarterback. Man, that's what you get out of Alex Smith. You get a quarterback that's going to get you in the playoffs. You got a quarterback that's going to have you have above 500 winning. He's a 70% thrower, so you're going to win about 70% of your games. That team is too inconsistent. And then you have Denver, and nothing against Denver. You got one of the best defenses. You got a hell of a receiving core, but you got a rookie quarterback, and you have too much veteran leadership over in Oakland for any of those teams really to outdo Oakland. And I went from a point that, like I said, I feel that they were a wild card, AFC wild card team to a potential division winner. I think they can win the West. They control their own destiny, so why not?
Well, I see. As you were talking about, Oakland and Denver and so on, I was thinking of another thing as far as not getting to the championship game, but when we were talking about Tony Romo and his injuries being a real factor, the next Tony Romo on the horizon, see if you agree with me, CJ, would be Ben Roethlisberger. The last couple of years, when he first broke in, I don't know whether it was because of his stature, his size, his maneuverability, he wasn't getting all that hurt, and you weren't seeing injuries become a factor. Now, the last 2 or 3 years, 3, 4 maybe, he's going down with these nagging injuries, and he's picking them up each year. It seems that he's sitting out games. I don't want to say he's as bad as Tony Romo in terms of missing games, but he's definitely missing significant portions of seasons.
I think with Ben Roethlisberger, I think that's just accumulation of taking the hits over the years. I think that they have just finally caught up with him. He's kind of always used his size. He's surprisingly mobile for his size, and he's hard to bring down because of his size. And for a lot of years, I think he took a lot more hits than he should have because he was using his size to his advantage, which I think has finally caught up with him in the latter part of his career, which is making it harder for him to have full, complete seasons or games. Eddie Robinson, the last living member of the Cleveland Indians 1948 World Series title team, will be in attendance for Game 6. That's really cool that they got that, even have that opportunity to have a member of the previous World Series team since it has been so long, and have an opportunity to have him out there. But, yeah, obviously he slows down. He's put on some weight. He's not as young as he once was. But when it comes to Ben Roethlisberger, I think it's just more of you've taken a hit after hit after hit. You're using your size and your mobility to gain first downs and 4th and 1s and 4th and 2s and being mobile and everything else. And you pushed it farther. I think if he would have been built like RG3 throughout the years, he probably would have not made this long of a career and suffered a lot more injuries. But because he was bigger and bigger than most quarterbacks, I think he was able to absorb a lot of the hits and the injuries. And now that he's getting older, I think
it's catching up to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree. That's like what I said initially was his size, but he used to try and go through people and not around them. So that's
Well, it's going to be that time. 3 hours up already. I'll let you go first. Let them know what we got going on Friday and where they can find you on social media.
Okay, most definitely. Friday we're going to have we have 2, and we're going to potentially have 3, hopefully, guests on Friday night. The first one I mentioned before is Rowan Pinnock, who is a wheel and modified driver who is also now, as of this year, I think, this past year they started, and he is going to come on and talk about his business venture, along with his crew chief and the crew chief's significant other. I'm not sure if they're married or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. But in any case, the 3 of them got together and is starting a wheel company, which intrigued me when I first heard about it, because I had known, auto parts dealers, and I knew that that's basically what's sold. Could be any type of auto part, but they're specifically geared to wheels, no pun intended. And so Rowan Pinnock will be on to talk about their business venture that he is running with himself, his crew chief, and the crew chief's significant other. That's one guest. The other guest will be Kyle Soper, who took part in or tried to qualify for the truck race, his debut in Martinsville. And so we'll discuss with him what went on that entire weekend for that team. And again, as CJ always says, it's not so much where you finish in your debut, it's just the idea of being out there. And certainly he had a lot of people from Riverhead and Long Island rooting for him because his racing career thus far has been as a Riverhead Tour modified driver and legend driver as well. So we'll have him on to talk about his weekend. And then also, hopefully, we'll have Bob Finan, who just last weekend was given a party of sorts to celebrate his 40th year in auto racing on Long Island, and a better historian I have never met. You could ask him about any car from Long Island's history, and he'll be able to tell you who drove it and how it came about and everything else. So we'll definitely talk to Bob and congratulate him for the years in auto racing. Those are potential. On Friday, you can reach me, in addition to this program all week, you can reach me on my fan pages, the Hot Laps with Stats fan page and the Hot Laps with Stats pages. Again, just to mention, I ask fans, and especially with the off-season now, if there's anybody you'd like to hear from on the program, because we're going to go through the off-season. We have enough potential guests to do that. But if there's any guests that you want to hear from during the off-season, by all means, drop me a line, private message me, and I will do my best to get them on the program. In addition to the show pages, you can get me on the 110 Nation pages as well, or you can get me on my Twitter at Stats108. So there's a couple of ways for you to reach me, and look forward to another good show on Friday night, CJ.
Make sure you guys check us out here, the 110 Nation Sports Show, every Monday through Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We kick things off. Tomorrow night we got Mark Rett from Rett Jones Racing joining us at 9 o'clock. We got Izzo, our NHL expert, joining us at 9:30, so make sure you guys tune in for that. I have not seen any other guest lists. I'm assuming that we are guest-free outside of them this week, as far as I know anyway. You guys check us out on Facebook, 110 Nation Sports. You can check out my personal fan page, Mr. CJ Sports. Also on Twitter, at 110 Nation, my Twitter account, at CJ Sports1. Don't forget, you guys can check us out at www.the110nationsports.com for all the latest going on here at the 110 Nation. Also got to make sure that I thank Fit for Life. You guys check them out on Facebook. Or you guys can go to our site, www.the110nationsports.com. On the right-hand side, I have a nice, pretty banner. All you do is click on it and let you know if there's a location near you, 24/7, 365. Get your gym on. Courtesy staff, clean facility, all the equipment you need. That's Fit for Life. Make sure you guys check them out. Also, Snafu Seasoning, the official sponsor of Racing with Big Sweat. Thursday nights, 9 p.m. All you got to do is just call in and be part of the show. Talk to the guests, talk to the host. They'll hook you up with a bottle of Snafu Seasoning. I've got to thank I-95 Sports Network, Mile High Radio for rebroadcast or syndicating our shows. Without all these great people, we would not be able to continue to grow and be able to do what we do. You can catch us on iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, Blog Talk Radio. We have a player on the site, www.the110nationsports.com. It played like the last 7 shows. Also, you can get the show links over on social media as well. Tomorrow night, back at it right here, 7 o'clock, Don't be late. Got a great show planned for you guys. Until then.
Thanks for listening to the 110 Nation Sports Show with Mr. CJ Sports. You are a part of the 110 Nation, so be sure to visit the110nation.com for everything related to the show. You can follow CJ on Twitter at 110nation and on Facebook at 110 Nation Sports. Until next time.